everybody, and welcome back to the StarCityGames.com Philadelphia Open. I'm Chris Van Meter with Andrew Boswell, and for those of you who have been watching, and for those of you who are just joining us, we have our quarterfinal matchup. Harlan Fear, our 7th-ranked seed on Colorless, our 4th-ranked seed on Colorless Eldrazi against Gerry Thompson, who is 5th on Colorless Eldrazi. Harlan's going to have the play. He's going to start out with the Chalice of the Void on 0, which is going to shut off the Mox Diamonds from Gerry, and a copy of Eldrazi Mimic off of that Eye of Ugin.
So there's a couple of things that we haven't mentioned yet that's pretty cool about this matchup. Harlan has a top 8 in Standard and Modern, but this is his first Legacy top 8. And on Gerry's side, since he had been working with Wizards of the Coast and has returned, this is his first Legacy top 8, I believe. So pretty interesting thing to see, you know, these players kind of, Harlan rising up through the ranks and Gerry kind of rising up once again.
So Gerry's just going to play an Ancient Tomb and pass back to Harlan, and this is going to be a big turn for Harlan to potentially deploy something that costs, 4 mana, maybe even just like a 3 mana Endbringer to power up his Eldrazi Mimic. But it looks like we're just going to see a Cavern of Souls. We'll get verification on what he names, and that Eldrazi Mimic's going to get into the red zone, knocking Gerry down to 18.
And this is a pretty cool play on Harlan's part. A lot of this matchup is going to come down to who has the biggest creatures. And he is choosing to save his Endless ones for a later turn to deploy, just so that there'll be a bigger body. In particular, the size 4/4 and 5/5 particularly matter, because outside of Endless one, those are going to be the biggest creatures. We can see here he's maybe getting a little punished for not proactively playing that.
So Gerry is going to lay an Eye of Ugin, take 2 damage from his Ancient Tomb and fall to 16 and cast a Thought-Knot Seer. Harlan's going to reveal a hand that has Cavern of Souls, Endless one, Warping Wail, and Phyrexian Revoker. Once Gerry takes this Endless one, Harlan's going to be left with a bunch of air.
Yeah, we can see how this Eye of Ugin was actually made Harlan's hand a little awkward. He couldn't even cast his Phyrexian Revoker on turn 2. So while we thought that he had an amazing start, the fact that he didn't do anything on turn 2 kind of sets him back from where we thought he was, which was so far ahead.
So Gerry is going to also lay a Eldrazi Mimic after he uses that Thought-Knot Seer and pass the turn back to Harlan. Harlan's just going to play a Cavern of Souls. The first one was naming Shapeshifter, I imagine. The next one is going to name Shapeshifter as well, which is correct. He's going to pass the turn back. He did pick up a copy of Phyrexian Metamorph, which might allow him to copy that Thought-Knot Seer that Gerry has on his side. But for now, that Eye of Ugin is preventing him from casting any more spells.
Yeah, this Eye of Ugin is actually kind of problematic for Harlan. It's essentially netting him 0 mana on a lot of these turns and making it so that he can't make a lot of his plays.
Gerry's going to take 2 and cast a Thought-Knot Seer, going down to 14. Harlan is going to respond by using Warping Wail to exile the Eldrazi Mimic, since it is a 2/1 before that Thought-Knot Seer enters the battlefield. And now Gerry's going to have his choice between Phyrexian Metamorph and Phyrexian Revoker. He's just going to play another Thought-Knot Seer and take both cards and attack Harlan down to 16, and this is looking real ugly.
Yeah, Harlan was off to a great start, but he's just not getting there.
Harlan's going to go ahead and scoop it up. Gerry's going to jokingly show him a copy of Mox Diamond that was stranded in his hand from that Chalice of the Void on 0. And here's where the games get a little interesting. Cards like Chalice of the Void, cards like Thorn of Amethyst are not very good in the mirror match. So now we get to see how these sideboard cards work. So let's take a look at the sideboard as Gerry Thompson takes the first game against Harlan Fear in this colorless Eldrazi mirror. So Harlan has 4 Leyline of the Void, 2 Dismember, 2 copies of Ratchet Bomb, 2 Spatial Contortion, 2 Winter Orb, 2 Endbringer, and a Warping Wail. How do you think he's going to sideboard?
So I think he's going to be bringing in the Dismembers, the Ratchet Bombs, the Spatial Contortions, the Endbringers, and I don't think that he's going to bring in the Warping Wail, but depending on how things line up with what he wants to take out, it may make the cut.
I could see that happen. We do have, like I said, a lot of cards that are just not very good in the mirror.
Right.
You want to use those lock pieces against the combo decks, but they're not going to do much when you're playing against other Eldrazi. Gerry, on the other hand, he has 3 Warping Wail, a Dismember, 2 copies of Umazawa's Jite, 2 copies of Pithing Needle, and All His Dust, a Fairy Macabre, and his 2 copies of Sphere of Resistance. How do you think Gerry's going to side here?
So the way Gerry is going to sideboard is a little interesting to me. He doesn't have nearly as many cards for the sideboard, but he does have some cards that he wouldn't mind taking out. So I think he's definitely going to be bringing in the Warping Wails and the Dismembers just so that he can have more interaction. I think Umazawa's Jite is a house in the mirror, and he may bring in Pithing Needle simply as a way of shutting off his opponent's Umezawa's Jites. And if Gerry decides to do that, it may mean that he's inclined not to bring his own in. But that would be a pretty interesting judgment call, and I'm kind of curious to see exactly what he does.
Now, both of these players, as you can see, Harlan is currently 7th on our leaderboard. Gerry is 8th on our leaderboard. SCG points are very important to both of these players, so let's take a look at what exactly they're playing for. So if you win this Open, you get $5,000 and 30 SCG points.
Ooh, mama, that is good.
That is a lot of SCG points. In fact, I believe that would put Gerry in position to be right up there at the top with Jeff Hoagland and Joe Lissette.
So a new challenger may be approaching.
A new challenger may be approaching. So if you get second place, $2,000 and 25 SCG points, so still a whole bunch. Top 4 will get 1,000 apiece and 20 points. Top 8, 500 and at least 15 points, and then so on and so forth as we move down the ranks. So there is a lot on the line for these players. These SCG points are extremely important. There are 2 Opens and then the Invitational in Columbus after this Open, and you want to be within the top 3 point earners to be able to punch that ticket to the Players' Championship. Yeah,
things are coming down to the wire, and these points are really valuable. So
so if Gerry wins this, it will put him in the top 3, and he'll be in the running to try and qualify for this.
Dude, that would be sick. Talk about making things real dramatic.
Now, Gerry is 8th. Harlan is 7th. So if Harlan wins this tournament,
same thing holds true for him.
It will also put him in the ring. So as much as we like to talk about our own Gerry Thompson with that SCG shirt, Harlan has these beautiful flowing locks that he gets his power from, much similar to Tom Ross with his leather jacket. So like I said, there's a lot on the line for both of these players. They're definitely going to take their time in sideboarding, looking over each other's deck lists. This has been great Magic so far. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I wonder how good of a Magic player I could be if I could steal some of Harlan's hair and steal Tom Ross's leather jacket.
What if you had both?
That's what I mean. Could I play both decks at the same time?
You just play Infect Eldrazi?
Yeah, I would just double queue the tournament. I'd be like one of those chess masters who's like walking along, just playing multiple games at once.
Maybe if you had multiple personalities.
I like my own personality. I think one Boz is enough. You guys don't need to deal with multiples of me.
Multiple Boz double queuing.
Yeah.
So the biggest part of sideboarding here that I think is going to be interesting is how many of these lock pieces are going to come out. I think Harlan's going to cut all 4 copies of his Chalice of the Void, and he's going to cut the 2 copies of Trinisphere that he has in his deck. And that's going to open up some spots for cards like Dismember and Ratchet Bomb. Gerry has 4 Chalice and 4 Thorn of Amethyst in this deck, so he can bring in up to 8 cards if he wants to. Yeah,
the thing is that Gerry doesn't really have 8 cards to bring in, so I have to imagine that he's going to leave some number of those disruption pieces in. I think he's kind of stuck on that, so it's just kind of a matter of how he wants to go about doing it. That said, if he does want to bring in both the Jites and the Pithing Needles, which are probably going to be a little counter-synergistic, he'll just barely have enough cards to bring in to take out those 8 lock pieces. But again, I wouldn't feel super good if I was Gerry doing that, but that might be his plan.
So as we go in here to Game 2, Gerry Thompson is up a game. Harlan Fear is going to be on the play. We're getting some updates. Ellie versus Tom are tied 1-1 going into Game 3. Rich is up a game against Lewis. David is up a game against Noah. So both Miracles and Lands are currently on track to fulfill Boz's prophecy from earlier in the top 8.
The prophecy has been spoken. Don't disappoint me, guys.
So Harlan is going to start out here on a Wasteland, and I think he's passed to Gerry, and Gerry is deciding what he wants to do on his turn.
Kind of an awkward step 1 to cast the Wasteland, but we've seen all throughout the day that in the Eldrazi mirror, the Wastelands just get played as soon as possible and fired off as soon as possible.
So Gerry is going to play Cavernous Souls and name Eldrazi. Harlan's just going to play a Mishra's Factory and pass back to Gerry. And let's see what he can cobble together here.
So if Gerry does want to play a land that taps for multiple mana, the Eye of Ugin is probably the best one to run into a Wasteland, simply because it's the most narrow. It only creates mana for Eldrazi, and also it's legendary, so drawing multiples can be pretty problematic.
So there is that Eye of Ugin and a Matter Reshaper from Gerry Thompson. He's going to pass back to Harlan Fear. Harlan does have access to 4 mana this turn with that City of Traders, and he's going to cast a Thought-Knot Seer, and Gerry reveals a hand that has a second copy of Ayavugan, a Wasteland, a Pithy Needle, a Dismember, a Thought-Knot Seer, and an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth.
So I have to imagine that the Pithy Needle is mainly for GT, but it can name Wasteland, it can name Mishra's Factory. The other thing too is now that Harlan sees that Ayavugan, you can be essentially guaranteed that Harlan's not going to be wastelanding Gerry's Eye that's already in play.
Now what do you take here? Do you take that Dismember to protect your Thought-Knot Seer, or do you take Gerry's Thought-Knot Seer so he's not able to fully develop his board?
I think I would take the Thought-Knot Seer. If Gerry wants to play the Dismember, it's going to take his whole turn, and Gerry's not going to be able to get information from it in the same way that he could with Thought-Knot Seer.
So it looks like we just got word that Tom Ross
has been spoken.
Has beat Ellie Cassis 2-1. Good job, Tom. Gerry is up a game here against Harlan going into his turn 3. Now he does have that Urborg in his hand, so he could use that, and that turns on the mana for his Ayavugan, but it also turns on Ayavugan mana for Harlan.
Right.
So we're just going to see a Dismember on the Thought-Knot Seer. Gerry's going to draw a card. Looks like he has a couple copies of Warping Whale. We might even just see a Wasteland here taking care of that Mishra's Factory.
We could. I'm a little surprised that Gerry is spending so much of his life total on that Dismember when he could have played the Urborg, but I guess he either has another play that he wants to do or he wants to fire off that Wasteland.
Well, he is also going to draw a card from the Thought-Knot Seer, so it could be anything. It could even be a boat.
Wow, and going for the City of Traders, I'm pretty surprised by that. Granted, it is a land that taps for 2 mana, but it needs to be sacrificed as soon as Harlan plays another land. So if Harlan wanted to develop his mana further, he'd have to sacrifice it.
So Gerry decided to Wasteland that City of Traders. Harlan has a replacement Wasteland. He's going to cast a 4/4 Endless one.
So essentially, the trade that Gerry made here was Gerry decided to take 4 extra damage from its Dismember to make sure that Harlan's follow-up Endless one was only a 4/4 instead of a 6/6. So paying 4, essentially the trade is pay 4 life, make sure that your next play has -2/2 permanently. Kind of an interesting way to look at it.
Gerry's going to be able to make a 5/5 Endless one here, though, which is a little bit bigger, and then just pass the turn back to Harlan.
And again, in these creature mirrors, a lot of what matters is just having the biggest creature on the board. Frequently, things can boil down to a metric as simple as that. So having this 5/5 on the board basically reigns supreme. Also, as we get farther into these games, the Endless ones become a really big deal because they're the only thing that can be bigger than a 5/5 in the matchup. The Reality Smashers and Endbringers cap out at 5/5, whereas the Endless one has the opportunity to surpass them.
So Harlan's just going to deploy an Eldrazi Mimic with that City of Traders, and then cast a Ratchet Bomb, which gives him some protection against Gerry's Endless one, since it is a bit bigger than the one that he has. Now with that Eldrazi Mimic having 1 toughness, it is susceptible to getting tagged by Warping Whale, and I believe Gerry has at least 1 copy in his hand.
Yeah, Warping Whale has been pretty impressive in these matchups, but even in some other matchups too. It's as a legacy card, it has quite a bit of versatility.
So Gerry's going to cast Pithy Needle. Harlan's going to use his Ratchet Bomb in response. We'll get word what Gerry decides to needle.
And they're just making sure that cards go into the graveyard in the proper order. Unlikely that it's going to have an impact on any of the cards that they're playing, but it's always nice to keep things all trim and proper.
So it's like Gerry's still deciding what he wants to name with the needle. So he's named Mishra's Factory. He's going to get in for 3 with his Matter Reshaper, and then just play a Eldrazi Mimic of his own. So Harlan is going to Reality Smasher. Gerry's going to stop him, because I imagine he's going to use a Warping Well here to get rid of that Eldrazi Mimic.
And that Reality Smasher, not only can it race back, but it is just the biggest creature on the board. Unfortunately, Harlan's a little lower in the life total race, so he may be forced to play defense here.
Looks like Harlan did name Shapeshifter on his Cavern, And it looks like Gerry just picked up a copy of Dismember, which is huge. So he gets to discard his extra copy of Ayavugan to pay for the trigger on Reality Smasher, and then attack for 5 with his Eldrazi Mimic and Matter Reshaper.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal for Gerry.
Harlan does have a copy of Phyrexian Metamorph. Cavern is on Shapeshifter, so he can use the blue mana from it without having to take any damage.
Ugh.
And even though he has a copy of Matter Reshaper, Gerry just picked up a copy of Reality Smasher, which is going to enter the battlefield, trigger the Eldrazi Mimic, become a 5/5, crash in for a whole bunch. Harlan's going to take 8 and go down to 1 life.
Yeah, that was pretty gross. So I think Harlan is just dead here, so still very well fought. First Legacy top 8, and we get to see the return of Gerry Thompson. He has won so many matches. He's won so many opens. He's won. He's one of the original Invitational winners, and seeing him return and to his former dominance is pretty exciting.
So Gerry has gone ahead and won his match 2-0 over Harlan Fear in the Battle of the Colorless Eldrazi, breaking up the Prophecy of Boz.
Yeah, well, I still think Harlan was favored. He